All right, so welcome everybody to our Russ Norris MMR clinic for tonight. It's 8 o'clock on January 15th, 2021. And Pete Watson wanted to start before Russ Norris, just as he's our AP chair. And if anybody's going to get their Master Model Railroader certificates or award, they have to go through Pete Watson. And some people are new to this. They don't know what this is. And people that think they know it all don't, because Pete Watson knows it all. So Pete, why don't you just tell us a little something about your position and what you do and what people need to do?
Well, don't say I know it all, because I sure as hell don't know it all. But yeah, for those of you that aren't aware, the Master Model Railroader program is a program designed to encourage people to get proficient in many different aspects of the hobby. And as you move along and you gather certificates, there are certain requirements that have to be met to meet each certificate. When you have at least one of each of each of the 4 areas and a total of 7, then you qualify to become a Master Model Railroader. So the 4 different areas are model railroad equipment, settings, engineering and operation, and service to the hobby. So you have to have at least one certificate in each of those 4 categories. And then within the categories, under equipment, you've got motive power and cars. Under settings, you've got structures, scenery, and prototype models. Engineering and operation, you have model railroad engineer civil and model railroad engineer electrical and chief dispatcher. And then under service to the hobby, you have association official, association volunteer, and model railroad author. So within each one of those 4 general categories, it's pretty easy to get at least one. Some of them are a little more difficult than others, but everybody should be able to get at least one in each one of the 4 categories. For those of you that have been in the hobby for a while, you've probably got a lot of the work already done. And it mostly means now just getting the paperwork done and getting it filed. So anybody that has an interest, get in touch with me. You can get in touch with me at, you go on to the Hub website at hubdiv.org. You can find me either under clerk or AP chairman, or any one of those will get to me. Let's see, I just had another thought I wanted to, well, it flew the coop to come back to me.
Yeah, so you also do the Golden Spike as well, right?
Yes, the Golden Spike is another one. That one is designed to kind of give people a chance to test it out and see what it's like. But the Golden Spike does not count towards Master Model Railroader. So you want to keep that in the back of your mind. The program right now, a lot of it can be done without personal contact. You can get it, for instance, let me see, scenery, I think, prototype models, the engineering ones, civil and electrical. Those can all be witnessed or judged, however you want to call it, author, association volunteer, those kinds of things. I don't need to come out and see those. We can do that online. However, the ones that require some model building, motive power, cars, structures, those do need to have some judging done, and we still managed to get that done, even in the pandemic situation. So like I say, anybody that's interested, feel free to give me a shout anytime, and I'll be happy to work with you. We've got several people with us tonight that are working on it. Andy's working on it. He's got what, 2 left to go, Andy, I think?
2 to go, yeah.
2 to go. Malcolm Hauk is working on his. He's got 1 left to go. Let me see, who else is out there? James Van Bachlen, I saw you here somewhere. How many have you got left to go, James? You're getting close, aren't you?
Unmute.
Yeah,
James.
he's muted.
I have 7 certificates, but neither of them is cars or motive power.
Okay, so you got to get one more in that,
if I-
that category then.
I have to get one of those two, but I'm probably going to get structure. I'm going to ask you to look at structures before cars or motive powers. Then I'll
Okay,
have
good.
8. I still won't have MMR.
Yeah. Just give a shout, you know, anytime.
Jim Kirkham should be
Let's see,
getting
is there
close,
anybody
too.
else out there that I missed that's working on
Jim
it? Tom?
Kirkham and Dave Trimble.
At 3.
Oh, yeah, yep, Dave and Jim. And who was the other one, Andy?
Jim Kirkham
Yeah, I got Jim. I just
and
mentioned.
Dave
Jeff.
Trimble.
Yeah, and that's 2. Was there one
And
more?
Bruce, do you have any?
Bruce got a bunch.
Yeah,
I've
Bruce
got
is an
3.
input, so I haven't caught up with inputs yet.
I've got 3, Peter.
Oh, and Eric. Okay, so there's a bunch of guys out there now that are coming up on it. You know, we got some that are very close, some still have a little bit to go. So I
Yeah.
encourage you all strongly to take part in the program, and it's a lot of fun.
And,
So
I've seen Paul St. Martin's layout, and my God, this guy's a heavyweight. He's got an incredible layout. He just has to do the paperwork and do some volunteer work.
Well, I mean, that's, you know, like I said, anybody that's been in the hobby for any length of time is probably already a good way there. Oh, Dave Inslee's another one that's working on it.
That's right. Dave's down there. He's got a, what, electrical, Dave?
Yeah, he's got,
Yeah.
he's got several. Yep. So, yep. In fact, I've got one here for him. I got to get it up to him one of these
And
days.
Andy, thank you very much. That's very nice of you to say.
Thank you.
So,
You
Pete,
deserve it.
if I can just do a little plug here for you.
Yep.
You know, one of the things that I've discovered is even if you can't work on your layout, there's a lot of things you can do in the hobby that count. And I think it's important to recognize that, you know, the volunteer author, those things are actually quite doable. And if you're putting any time into the hobby, just keep track of it. You'd be surprised how fast you catch up and get those certificates, and it does count. So they do appreciate the work you do for the organization, and that's an important aspect. You need to get one of them anyway. So
Yeah. And the author, there's a lot of different ways you can get points for author. It doesn't mean necessarily just writing articles for magazines. You can do clinics and blogs, and there's a whole bunch of ways that you can pick up that. So it's pretty easy. If you're interested in looking at the program, you go to the NMRA website and click on the education tab. And then under that, it'll show you the achievement program. Go to that one, and it has all of the different categories there, and you can click on them and see what the requirements are for each one of them. I'm not going to, you know, try to do that tonight because it would take up too much
Right.
time.
Well, that's all right, Pete, because I'm going to cover the same stuff.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Well, I was gonna say, Pete, thank you for the introduction, and with no further ado, let's get Russ Norris on, and I am going to make him the host, so you can share your screen. So
All right.
you want to change the host to Russ Norris? I'm saying
no,
yes.
just give him permission to present. Don't give him host.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because that gives him host responsibility. He doesn't want to deal with the
I don't want to deal with all a bunch of,
Well,
railroaders.
critical people here.
Exactly. No, just give him just allow anybody to share, and then he'll share.
I think as I've thrown him in there, he's already there now.
Well,
Yeah.
oh, there I am. Okay. All right, folks. Well, here we go. Share. And good. Now all I have to do is get it to full size.
Okay.
Well, how do I do that?
Click on slideshow and then start from
Slideshow.
the beginning.
Slideshow.
Slideshow.
It's
I'm
on the
having-
top. Yeah. Okay,
Top
you're getting
bar.
there.
Top bar. Oh, up there. Oh, it moved. All right. Annotate, remote control, more.
No,
I
click
don't-
on
I don't-
click on slideshow.
I don't.
Slideshow.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 over on the very top.
Slideshow is one of the tabs.
I know, I'm looking at it. I got mute, stop video, security, participants, new share, pause share, stop
No.
share, annotate.
You
I
should
don't-
you should be on your PowerPoint screen.
Okay.
I saw your mouse just now.
Yeah,
Okay.
A
and
little higher.
Go on the top bar, all
yeah,
the way at the top.
okay.
You should see slideshow.
Slideshow. Oh, got it.
Click
All
on
right.
that.
And
From
go
the
to
beginning.
from the beginning. There we go. Sorry, guys. There we go. All right. Well, thank you for one and all for joining this evening. This is actually not just the story of how I got into the MMR AP program, but also about a number of people from the hub and other model railroaders from across the country have helped me along the way get started and guide me down the path. And it's really, it's also the story of my model railroad, which the latest incarnation of which I started when I moved here and retired in 2006. It didn't really get the bench work up till 2008, but we're going to kind of take a look at the journey along the way. Now, it all really started at the Amherst Train Show in Springfield back in 2012. I don't know if were any of you there in 2012? We may have met. I was invited by a friend of mine who is a member of the Friends of the East Broadtop to help out at the FEBT table at the show, and so I did. And turns out that this table, this display, was only maybe 50 to 100 feet from the hub's modular layout. During the show, the other fellow and I took turns taking a break. And so on one of my breaks, I wandered around, this is the Better Living building, I think, and came across the hub. And it was really my first involvement with it. This is really a setup picture because there's nobody there. In fact, the table was loaded with people all through the show. And the one who I remember most specifically was Peter Higgins. I was kind of looking at all of the stuff on the table, and he came over, and you know how he can buttonhole people and really kind of talk your ear off. Is Peter on this evening? And he tried to sell me then on becoming a member of the NMRA again. I had been a member back in the 80s, but let it lapse. And he was telling me all the wonderful things that I could get as a member of the NMRA. They have a special, the hub helps subsidize, so I could get a 1.5-year membership for less money, and I could get a magazine that would come regularly and discounts at hobby dealers, and I could get into the AP program. And I said, what's that? And so Peter explained that the AP program, as Pete was talking about just a minute ago, is a program that helps people hone their skills and improve their skills in modeling. It requires you to do a lot of modeling that is then judged in the four categories that Peter was talking about. And if you get 7 of these certificates, and with at least 1 in every category, you are a winner. Well, I started checking it out, and I found out that, as Pete was saying, here are the 4 categories. Under equipment, you have Master Builder Motive Power and Master Builder Cars. Under settings, you've got structures, scenery, and prototype models. Under engineering and operation, you have civil, electrical, and chief dispatcher. And then service to the hobby includes the association official, that is someone who's an officer at some level, local, regional, or national, association volunteer, and model railroad author. If you're already in the AP program, you know that most people have skills in a specific area that tend to predominate in your modeling. And so it's easier to get certificates in some of these categories than others, which is how some of you can accumulate 7 or 8 certificates and still not get to the MMR. You have to have at least one in each category. And as I was looking over this, I noticed that the bottom of the fourth category was model railroad author. Now, this is in 2012. Remember that I'm starting to look at this spring of 2012 because the Springfield show is in January. So I thought, well, I really have started writing a few articles for magazines, and maybe this was one that I already have enough points for. So I checked out the author requirements. Now, this one I did not submit to the AP director of the hub. I went to the AP coordinator for the region because I really wasn't into all of these levels and distinctions yet. But when I read the requirements, it said you have to earn a total of 42 points. And you can do it in a variety of ways. You can publish articles. In every article you publish can accumulate points for the amount of text you have, the number of lines of text, for photos, drawings. They all have a set amount of points that accumulate. You can lead a clinic or clinics. You can develop instructional videos, and you can go into the area of electronic publications, in which, as you will see in a moment, turned out to be the winner for me. Although no more than half the required points may be claimed for electronic publications. Well, I started publishing in 2004 when I was just starting to model the East Broadtop narrow gauge, and I had lived in Mount Union, which was the northern junction of the EBT and the Pennsy. And I had wandered around this engine house in the yards, and this was in the 70s. I thought that would be a neat building to model. Turns out the fellow who was also at the FEBT table with me had been to Mount Union and taken photographs of the building, including close-up photos of the stone blocks, which are kind of unique. And he sent me a file with I guess it was a JPEG file with a picture of the blocks, and I was able to copy that and paste and copy and paste until I had a full page of these stone blocks. And so the building itself was made of styrene, but it was covered with paper stone blocks, kind of an early model railroad way of doing modeling. But it was an interesting and different approach, and I got it published in the Timber Transfer, which is the journal of the Friends of the East Broadtop, back in 2004. And then in 2006, I modeled some more buildings from Mount Union. These were little company houses along the EBT tracks on Railroad Avenue that were for workers in one of the local brickyards. Mount Union was the silica brick capital of the world for a good part of the first half of the 20th century. And I thought these were neat little houses. And so I took pictures and developed plans and built them and wrote an article about it. And then in 2010, I did an article about some of the shop buildings in Orbezonia, which is about 10 miles south of Mount Union. And had that article published in the HON3 annual. This is just one of the buildings, the stone farmhouse on the right, some of you may recognize as being a C.C. Crowe model, but it was kit-bashed a bit to make it more resemble the stone farmhouse, which is in the yards in Orbezonia. And then in 2011, I was forced to build a town because I had Dave Trimble had encouraged me as I was building the layout to put a return track in from one end to the other, so I didn't have to do a turn at the Y. Whenever I was operating, I could actually run in a loop for visitors, and I thought it was a great idea. Except then it turns out that the loop, what you can see the track is over here against the wall, was 4 feet from the aisle. So I had to put a pop in and I had to cover it. And this was a town that I built on a piece of 1-inch foam. When running for about the beginning of this incline all the way over to the houses, that all lifts off and you can get out. Well, anyway, that also got published. And when I counted it up, I had 21 points. And I thought, well, that's great. It only took me 8 years to get this far, another 8 years and I can get the author. And then I remembered the fourth category under author was electronic publications. In 2011, I had started a blog. This is the homepage of my blog. The Black Log Valley meets the East Broad Top Narrow Gauge. And I did it mainly to kind of keep a record of my construction of the layout, beginning with bench work and then trackage and scenery and structures. And I kept publishing these little posts periodically with pictures and drawings. And when I added up all the points for that, I had another 21 points. So here I was at the beginning of 2012, and I had enough points without doing anything to get the author certificate, which I did. I thought, well, where do you go from here? Well, I had to lay track, and I actually have a fairly complicated layout. It's two loops. One is HON3 and the other is HO. They have a yard where they join, which is a dual gauge yard. And all of that is controlled by an NCE Power Pro, radio control of the trains. So I had been doing a lot of the electrical stuff. I talked to Don Howd, who at that time was the AP coordinator for the hub, lived up on the North Shore. A wonderful man, used to be a police officer for the postal department. And Don drove down to Cape Cod and walked me around the layout and checked everything out. And it was a really great visit because it really got me started now. The author thing was just, I stumbled into it. But here I was actually having to do some work in order to get this particular certificate. Because you see, if you're going to qualify for model railroad engineer in electrical, you have to, well, build a railroad, an electrical control system on a model railroad capable of, well, you have to be able to control two trains in either direction. The railroad has to have a passing siding, at least one reversing loop or Y or turntable at a Y at both ends, one yard with at least 3 tracks. I had 3 of those. Storage facilities for at least 2 locomotives. I already had the engine house for storing 2 locomotives. And a power supply with a circuit breaker, blah, blah, blah. I had everything on the railroad already. So what was necessary to do then was to document it. Documenting, I found, turns out to be the most time-consuming part of the AP program. It's not enough to have a railroad and to have beautiful houses and buildings and nice scenery. You got to do all this writing. And doing it, you have to be able to show how you did what you did. So you need to keep records of what you're doing. Here again, my blog turned out to be a real godsend because I had all those records. For the electrical, you have to do at least 3 of this list of items here. The ones I did are marked in red, but there's nothing here that's terribly difficult. You have to be able to wire and operate a turnout. I guess most of us can do that. A crossover, single or double. I have a double and a single. And a gauge separation turnout turned out to be the thing I chose for the third because I have both HO and HON3. Then you have to wire and demonstrate the operation of at least 3 items out of a list of 22. You don't have to do all 22, just 3. And I list here all of the ones that I had already built. What I'm trying to say is that you don't have to necessarily reinvent the wheel. A lot of the stuff that you've already done may already qualify you for one of these AP certificates. I had an electrical turnout position indication on a panel. I had junctions with electrical protection. I had electronic throttle with momentum and braking. Dave Trimble got me into doing computer control of the railroad using JMRI. I'd installed DCC decoders because when you do narrow gauge on a specific railroad, it's bound to lead you into having to work with brass locomotives, and almost all the brass locomotives I've ever run into run on DC. So you've got to change them to DCC. And finally, you have to do a schematic drawing of your railroad, showing all the gaps and the blocks and the feeders and the electrical switches and power supplies. Note that a schematic is not a track plan. It's a much simpler thing. And then you have to prepare schematics, drawings of all of your wiring and components that you selected under the previous two sections. The important thing to remember here is don't make the requirements more than they are. Don't read into them more than there's there. Read the requirements for each of these certificates and do what they ask. I've run into a lot of people over the years who want to elaborate and do all kinds of extra work, which is lovely, but it's not required. And it takes time away from doing other things like playing with your trains. Here, for instance, is the schematic diagram for my railroad. Now, it's very simple. I have an HON3 loop. It used to be just point to point with a Y at both ends, but I'm deeply grateful to Dave for having convinced me to put in that return loop. It has an HON3 loop, and it has an HO loop, which runs in the background with trains just going by periodically to give you the impression that there's an outside world. And it shows the Power Pro, the laptop, the circuit breakers, the automatic reversers, and here linking the HO and HON3 is a yard, which has dual gauge track. And it shows the gaps where you have to have electrical gaps between your Y and the rest of the rails. It's a very simple schematic. This is maybe not so easy to see, but did one for the power control, showing again how the power supply is connected to the various power districts and to the computer and to the radio control. Did a diagram of how I wired my locomotives for DCC. If any of you have ever purchased Soundtrack's decoders, you'll find this on the package. This is literally just a copy of the package. And here is my gauge separation with the HON3 track down here and the dual gauge track up there. Very simple, just like the diagram for number 6 left-hand switch. That's really all of the drawings that I had to do. And as you can see, they're very simple. I did them on graph paper with a pencil, and then I kind of took a pen over the pencil line to make it a little darker, but it's not anything super classy, but it was sufficient to meet the requirements. So out of all of this, I learned a few things. If any of you are fans of NCIS, you'll remember that Gibbs, the detective, the policeman in NCIS, has this long list of rules. Rule number 27 is nothing is a coincidence. Well, I got my list of rules started with the electrical. Rule number 1, read the requirements. That is so important. Rule number 2, don't make the requirements more than they are. Don't read into them more than is there. Do what they ask. And rule number 3, and this is really important, document, document, and then document some more. And as you will see as we go along, this will come in very handy down the road. While Don and Ken, okay, I've just gotten that all confused. Don Howd had come down to do the electrical with me. And so As I worked on the next stages of my layout, which was building structures and doing scenery, I called him, and it was 2 years later when he came back down from the North Shore with Ken Bolivaruk, and they did the judging for structures and for scenery. Now, we're beginning to see some connections here, so pay attention. To qualify for this certificate, basically for structures, you have to build 12 things, 12 structures. And they have to be in 6 different types. You can't have 2 identical, it's 2 stations that look more or less alike. They have to be in different kinds of structure, or they have to be very different looking buildings. And one of the structures has to be a bridge or a trestle. At least 6 of the 12 have to be scratch built. And the rest can be kit built or kit bashed, but they have to be super detailed. And they have to win at least 87.5 points in the judging. Now, the important thing to remember here is that you get judged on 6 of the 12 structures, but they can be any one of the 6. It's not just the scratch built. If you feel that the kit built with some super detailing is a better model, you don't do it with that one. So here's one of the buildings that I used for structures is the company store in Robertsdale at the end of the EBT, 30 miles south of Mount Union on Broadtop Mountain, where the coal mines were located. This was scratch built from plans that I got from the county building commission, because the building had long since been demolished. It's styrene with paper. This is commercial paper stone blocks. Then, as you'll see shortly, it's actually pretty good facsimile. That was one. That was a scratch built. Another of the 6 buildings that were judged was the old post office in Robertsdale, where the second floor used to be the offices for the coal company till they built a new office building across the street. And for many years, the post office was here. One of the nice things about having someone who works for the post office do the judging is he keyed me on things that I would have missed completely. He said, at this time, I didn't have a mailbox out front. He said, there is no post office anywhere in the country that doesn't have a mailbox in front and a flag. The flag you can't see because it's over here, but he's the one that cued me in. Now, that's after the railroad moved its offices out of this building. The building was used for a lot of different things. Sometimes they had apartments on the second floor. During strikes, they used some of those rooms to lock up strikers. The company did. And downstairs, they had various businesses, including a barbershop. So I thought that having a barbershop and pool hall was probably a legitimate, stretching it a little, but it's just kind of a tongue-in-cheek. On the left-hand side is the new coal company office building, which is also completely scratch built. And you can see the 4th building in the intersection, which is back in this little corner here. That's the depot. That was a kit, which is kit bashed. So these 4 buildings were all scratch built, but the rest, and there's one other structure, and that is you have to build a bridge or a trestle. This is on the HO line, not the narrow gauge line, because the EBT never had a bridge like this. My granddaughter at the time, who was 10 years old, had started me in this direction. She said, Pop, you got to build a tall, spindly bridge. I said, okay, I can do that. This is actually 2 Campbell kits put together. And she says, and it has to be a waterfall. I said, okay, I can do that. And then she said, and you have to have an alligator. And I said, Tori, this is Pennsylvania. We don't have alligators in Pennsylvania. But she was not deterred. So there you go. Believe it or not, that's a pewter alligator that's in HO scale. There's another one over here you can't see to this side. So note that while some of these structures were new, the company store, the old post office, the coal company offices, and the trestle. Others were used 2 years earlier for the AP Award for Author, the stone engine house, the company houses, the wooden storage sheds. There is no rule against using the same models for different awards, as long as you meet the requirements. And we'll see that when we get to the certificate for prototype modeling, which is based on some of the buildings we just looked at. So the fourth rule is do not reinvent the wheel. Build on what you've already done, on what you already have, and it's been approved. If you can apply it to the next certificate, go for it. For instance, the three houses. These were the houses that were one of the 6 buildings that were part of my structures certificate. Don Howd was so pleased with it that he said, "Can you give me the plans for those?" And he built one of his own, which I think was so much better than my own. This is one of the last things that he did before he passed away. So it's a really special building. And I was so pleased that he liked what I did. While they were there, Ken and Don also judged the scenery on my layout. Now, the scenery is obviously not as complicated as some of these other certificates. I mean, scenery, throw on some grass. But here are the requirements. You have to construct a completed section of your railroad, and I say at least 32 square feet in HO scale. That's because each scale has a different number. If you're modeling an N scale, obviously, because the scale is smaller, the amount of scenery can be smaller. And if you're doing S or O, you're going to have a larger area scenic. In the case of HO, it's 32 square feet, which if you think about it, is a 4x8 sheet of plywood. So it's not a lot. And you can do it in several different sections. I did some in the Mount Union area that was modeling. Some was up in Robertsdale. The area around the trestle was part of it. They add all of that together. You have to prepare a written description and photos describing the area that's been judged, and also a description of the materials and the methods you used. And you have to get 87.5 points. So here, for example, is some of the scenery that was part of that certificate. There's the end of the 1-inch piece of foam that covers the hole in the layout. Here are the houses that have appeared several times, and here they are again. By the way, the backdrop, which was done by Backdrop Junction, and I think he's no longer in business. This is a backdrop that's only 19 inches high because of the way the roof is pitched. I'm upstairs in the attic, but it's 17.5 feet long, and it really adds a lot to the effect. Here it's the far end of the layout in Robertsdale. You can see the back of the company store and the back of the coal company offices. These are all company houses that are kits available from Walthers, I think, or in the Walthers catalog, but they're only the back half. There's no front on any of these houses because the only thing you can see is the backyard, and that's what I wanted to model, since the backyards are what usually face the railroad tracks. Back here, this is as you might expect, lichen, but these are really walloping big pieces of lichen. I found that when I crossed the Bourne Bridge and started up Route 25 on my way off the Cape, along the side of the road there were just acres of this stuff on the hillsides on either side of the highway. Apparently they liked the moisture and the climate there because this stuff was everywhere. And I went back several times with big plastic bins and loaded it up with these clumps of lichen, most of which were rounded and looked like sort of tops of trees. I washed them, dried them on a screen. Then I boiled them in a solution of water and glycerin to keep them supple, and then they dried them again. And then finally, I put them in a paper, I sprayed them with adhesive and put them in a paper bag with some ground foam, shook the bag for a while. This material here has been on the layout now 6 or 8 years, and it's still flexible. It hasn't lost its ground foam, and it really does give a nice appearance. Moving away from downtown Robertsdale, just some more scenes of that include the trees, the grass, everyday things like the clothesline or a sandlot baseball game behind the company houses. So all of this was, and back at the other end. Right. This is back in Mount Union, where the brickyards, 3 brickyards were located. The biggest one was Harbors and Walker, which backed up against Jack's Mountain. This is Jack's Mountain on my layout. Jack's Mountain has been quarried for 100 years, and they started at the bottom, and then when that gave out, they went up higher and dug in, and then went up higher and dug in. And so you have these terraces going up the mountain to the very top, where this Ganister rock, which is a kind of a silica rock, was mined or quarried and then sent down by conveyor belt to the crusher, was then molded into bricks and baked in kilns. And these were high temperature bricks because of the kind of stone that was used. And then they were put on boxcars and sent off to Pittsburgh and Harrisburg, where they were used in the steel mills. Here's a close-up of the quarry. Here's a little bit further to the left of that same scene. You can see the coal processing plant in Mount Union. Coal was brought down in narrow gauge hopper cars. It was then cleaned and sorted in this building using a sand flotation system, and then dumped into standard gauge hopper cars, which are waiting for loads here. And then they went off on the railroad to wherever coal was needed. Another view of the company houses. Some lime kilns. The EBT's Rock Hill section was where there was an iron foundry, not a foundry, an iron furnace back around the turn of the century. So there was a lot of these lime kilns around. One thing I did want to point out, notice that when I tried to show that the railroad that kind of represents the Pennsylvania has nice clear gray ballast, whereas the EBT with its dual gauge tracks is kind of dirty brown. Just draw a distinction there. Now here's a little bit of the downtown park and the buildings, and you can see some of the cracks that I drew with a sharp tip pen, and manhole covers. I downloaded a whole sheet of manhole cover pictures off the internet, cut them out and glue them down. And of course, do a lot of work with decals and stuff. So all of that got judged and won the 87.5 points. So I now had author, electrical, scenery, and structures. How are we doing with time here, Andy? We can go a little further. You want to take a, Andy, do you want to take a break at around 8 o'clock?
Well, so I
I
don't
mean,
think
9
we
o'clock,
need to,
9
like,
o'clock.
If somebody wants to slip out, they can, unless,
Okay, just keep going.
yeah, and if you run shorter, you run longer, it's okay. We're pretty flexible.
Okay, I'll just keep going until I run out of, let me take a drink here. The next building was also in the same class as structures and scenery, because that's an area I really enjoy, and it appeals to me. And that's why I got all 3 certificates in that one category, and then had to look for where I was going to get the other categories. This is also an interesting, it was an interesting experience because it again happened at Springfield. I had been working on the prototype modeling certificate for a couple of years, between 2014 and 2016, and I had all of the required materials in a 3-ring binder. And I got invited by Larry Smith, that's Larry down at the bottom there, who's an MMR from Alabama, who was coming up to Springfield to lead a clinic. And he said, would you like to help me lead the clinic? And I said, sure. And he said, well, bring along your materials because we've got a bunch of MMRs that are going to be at the, what did they call it? The Model Railroad University. They included people like Miles Hale and Joe Robertson, who are well known nationally, have all kinds of articles and stuff out in publications and have produced videos. You can get videos by these guys, they're just amazing. And on the first night of the Model Railroad University, we went to the restaurant in the hotel. We're sitting around the table with all these guys, they had MMRs. And they said, let us look at your stuff, Russ. So I handed the notebook and they all passed it around and looked at it and they said, okay, we'll sign off on this. So this never even went to the region. I mean, it went straight to the NMRA because it had, all you need is an MMR to sign off on something like this. And I had 3, probably more than that, but I only have the 3 names. It was an amazing experience. To qualify for prototype modeling, you got to construct a scene on your model railroad that duplicates a scene on the prototype, which in my case is the East Broad Top. It can be animated, it can be static, but it has to have at least 6 models of prototype equipment or structures. And at least 4 different types of models has to be represented. That is rolling stock, structure, caboose or passenger car, and motive power. And 2 of the models have to be scratch built. So here's where we go with this. In addition, you have to write it up. You have to describe in writing with photos and other documentation, any other thing that you can add to verify that this is an actual prototype scene. So I chose to model the company square, as it was called, in Robertsdale. We saw those buildings a little bit back when we were looking at some of my structures. And these are structures that I'm going to use them in the prototype award. They were structures that we used for the structures award, but this is a different kind of requirement. So I decided I would build my model around the crossing of the EBT and Main Street in Robertsdale with the 4 main buildings, the company store, the depot, the old post office, and the company office building. And then I staged, well, I had old photographs that I picked up at train shows of this area, and I staged photos on my model that would reflect historic scenes that I had in the photographs. For example, well, before we get to that, this is beautiful downtown Robertsdale, population, what, about 2,000? There's the company store, and right across the tracks is the company office building. The depot is on the other side of Main Street right here, and the old post office is right there. If you go this way, you're heading north toward Mount Union. If you head this way, you're going south to the mines. And here's the old engine house that I'm currently building right now. So it was this area right in the middle here that was my prototype scene. Here, for example, is what the company store looked like around 1950. And actually was built in 1875. And after the railroad closed in 1956, it continued being a store for a while, and it'll finally, I guess, they didn't have enough business, so they closed, and in the 1990s, it sort of fell down and they had to demolish it. Here's my version of that. So you can see, it's a pretty close facsimile. I don't have the awnings of the upper windows, but everything else is pretty much there. Here's a photograph. This is an actual historical photograph of a southbound train, the string of empty hoppers crossing Main Street, past the depot, which is right over here. And you can see the company store in the background. The office building, the coal company office building is off to the right. It's out of the picture. Here is my reconstruction of that scene. Now, when the coal was mined, the EBT was really careful about weighing things over and over again to make sure they didn't have a lot of loss from all the stuff that was kind of piled on the top of the hoppers. So it was weighed at the mine, and then the cars were brought to the depot, which had a scale here. This is a scale track, and the cars were allowed to roll one at a time onto the scale with the trainman breaking it, and then after weighing, it would roll down across Main Street, and you can see through the window here is a line of loaded hoppers on the other side of the street, waiting for a complete train. Usually about 22 cars made up a full train to go back down the mountain to Mount Union and the intersection with the Pennsylvania Railroad. And here is my reconstruction of that scene. By the way, it was this picture that convinced me that I ought to cut all the pins off my KD couplers. They look so out of scale. God. Even on a Blackstone hopper car. Here's a string of hoppers. I think this must have been a Sunday afternoon when there wasn't anything happening, and a bunch of local kids from the town. I mean, what else are you going to do on a summer's day in Robertsdale? Nothing. So these are just kids hanging out at the station. And I thought, that's a neat scene. Let's reproduce it here. These kids seem a little older, but I couldn't find really young kids. So these look more like the Fonz and his followers hanging out here, just hanging out. I love this particular photo because it just picks up the joy of childhood, playing along the tracks, walking from tie to tie, while the engine sizzles in the background, waiting for orders to pick up the next load to go one way or the other. I wanted really badly to duplicate that scene, and here it is. Number 14 pulling a combine through here.
Is that Millie?
Huh?
Is that
No,
Millie?
that's not Millie. Millie's number 12. This is
12, okay.
14. This is one of the two engines that have been the mainstay of tourist operations, 14 and 15. Right now, the new owners of the EBT, it's now owned by a not-for-profit foundation, are in the process of restoring number 15 so it can start steaming again next summer, and number 17, which was a later engine, which is in pretty good condition too. So they'll have two steamers next year. And oh, here's the M1. M1 is an interesting car. The EBT bought the parts from Brill back in the 1920s, and they built it themselves from the parts at Orbizonia Rock Hill, which is where the shops are. So it's, believe it or not, this is a prototype kit. It was a kit from Brill, coming by the station on its way north to Mount Union, and here it is on my model. By the way, the flowers here are not just my fancy. The people of this little town took really good care of their station and their downtown area. And I have seen pictures of a circle of flowers like this, kind of a little park right down in this area. So I thought that would be a nice thing to add. And this is Company Square right here, depot, store, and then the other side of the other two buildings. So the MMRs at Springfield signed off on it, and now I have 5 of these certificates. I needed 2 more. I had some in every category except cars and motive power. But I wasn't ready to make the decision between those 2 yet. So I decided I would double back to 2012 when I was talking with Peter Higgins, and he talked me into joining the NMRA. And he also talked me into joining the membership committee, which I guess I'm still on, but I've been on it ever since because nobody's ever said I'm off it. And so I've been earning volunteer points and decided I might as well build on that. To qualify for an association volunteer, you got to serve on 1 or more committees or boards, national, regional, division, it doesn't matter, long enough to earn 60 what they call time units or TUs. You can earn these time units in a number of different ways. For serving on a hub committee like membership, you earn 1/2 time unit per month. That works out to 6 per year. So if I just served on the membership committee, it would take me 10 years to get there. But you can get points in other ways. Newsletter editors get points, judges at NMRA model contests, people who open their homes or club layouts for tours, people who do modular layouts, Boy Scout merit badge counselors, presenting a clinic. All those things can earn time units. Now, this is really important. You got to read the requirements extremely carefully because I got my ears pinned back a couple of times when I was asked people to sign off on. Well, I worked the membership desk at Marlboro, and I wanted to claim time units for that, and the answer was no, because serving on the committee, that's part of your committee responsibility. You can't get additional points for working the membership table. So you got to be careful about the rules and about keeping track, because this is going to extend over several years. And if you lose the piece of paper you have all of this information on, where and who signed off on it, and what were the dates and how many hours, well, you lose. So be careful. My volunteer service actually turned out to be fairly easy. I served on the hub membership committee for 6 years. So that's 36 points. I served on the hub board of directors for 3 years. That's 18 points. And then volunteering at the Amherst Train Show and at Marlboro, not at the membership desk, but at the front desk, collecting money and giving out tickets, or in the build-a-car section, helping kids build freight cars. I was able to get a half time unit for those kinds of things. And I shared a clinic at the Amherst show 1 year. So I was able to build up the 60 time units by 2019, which is only 7 years after I started. But that was a toughie because it was just so much record keeping. So here I am now. I've got 6 certificates. And the only category I don't have anything in is either motive power or car building, neither of which is one of my fortes. So I looked at the requirements for both. If you want to get your master model car building certificate, you have to build 12 cars. And they have to include a passenger car and a whole bunch of other requirements. For motive power, you only have to build 12 pieces of powered equipment. Of course, they have to be locomotives of some kind, but I got sold by the idea that 3 was a lot easier than 12. So I opted for motive power because I read the requirements carefully. And that's what I've been talking about. By the way, Pete Watson and Mike Tylick are the ones who were judges for me on my motive power. Motive power, says the NMRA, is any kind of steam, diesel, or electric locomotive, a traction unit, a trolley car, maintenance, other kind of self-propelled crane, anything that runs on rails and has a motor. So it's everything from speeders to streetcars to big boys. Gives you a lot of room. You don't have to build a brass rod locomotive, which I was not prepared to do. To qualify, you got to build 3 scale models of railroad motive power, three locomotives of some kind, one of which must be scratch built. Only one. The others can be modified kits or, well, I'll show you what they can be in a minute. But they have to be super detailed, and they have to be capable of propelling themselves on the rails. And they don't count motors and gears as part of the scratch building. You can use those. So I chose, whoops, there, I can't see it because I get this thing here. Let me see if I can move this. No, I can't. I chose to model 3 different kinds of motive power. First, a scratch-built HO gauge gas mechanical critter using DCC for power, sound, and lights. A critter is exactly what it says. It can be anything as long as it's self-propelled. I also built an HO scale steam dummy. I've always been fascinated with steam dummies, never actually seen one except in photos. Using parts of a kit, an HON30 Porter kit by Railway Recollections, it's a company up in Canada, the chassis of a lifelike N-gauge 060 switcher, and the shell of a Bachmann cable car. Think about that. And finally, I built an HO gauge model of the EBT's Yard Goat, number 6, using a modified 060 by AHM with parts from PSC and DCC sound power and light. So I'll take you through that. I was cruising around the internet looking for pictures of critters. And my God, there's all kinds of weird looking little things that are self-propelled, mechanical gadgets that run on rails. But I saw this and I fell in love with it. I said, that's a neat little machine. I have no idea who built it. Most of the information in the article online was in Japanese. So I'm assuming that the guy who built it was Japanese. But other than that, I don't, and I think it was not HO. It looks like it might have been S gauge. But I thought, I can do something like that. I decided I would build this contraption on a Stanton drive that I got from Northwest Short Lines. Stanton drive has the motor and the wheels and everything in it, and all you do is drop the car on top. And you can see by the color of the wires, you've got your black and red, and you've got your orange and gray. So you're already set up for DCC. You got the power take off from the wheels, and you got the wires that go to the motor. I started by using a brake and bending a brass sheet to form the chassis of this little contraption. And then I took the styrene and cut it out to make the end beams and the sides. And this is eventually what came out for the frame of the locomotive. These little gadgets here are not mine. those I did purchase commercially. But everything else here is just styrene shapes, some channel along here and some angle along the bottom, and some wire. It's all scratch built. Once I had the chassis, which could run by itself, then I had to build something on top of it. And so this is, again, all styrene. These little brass lights are obviously commercial, and the windows. Everything else is, and the nut bolt washers. Everything else is just styrene and styrene shapes. It was just large enough to fit in the decoder. That's the decoder there. Keep Alive, which popped out underneath the hood, and a speaker. But it actually all fit in. And I've got a problem here with my, why is that doing that? Stop. Oh, phooey. Well, we'll get back there. Just give me a second. Every once in a while, we have technical difficulties. And here.
Resume slideshow looks good to me.
What?
Your mouse was just over a pop-up that I see that said resume slideshow.
Oh, there it is. Thank you, but I'm not quite there yet. Here we go. Thanks. Appreciate that. So this is what it looked like finished. Here it's pulling a beer refrigerator car past the coal plant. And I actually wanted to share with you a very brief movie of it in action on my trestle with sound yet. But unfortunately, for some reason, it's running much slower than the actual film. So it's going to run out of, where is it? Here it comes very slowly. I'm almost out of time here. There you go. And the film actually had it running all the way across. I don't understand the technical problem here, but we ran out of space. Anyway, that was the critter. So you see, I didn't have to build a brass rod engine. I just had to build something that was self-propelled and interesting. Now, the steam dummy, which was the second requirement, the second thing I chose to build, has fascinated me for a long time. Steam dummies were used in the 1800s, 1840 to maybe 1860, or maybe a little beyond that even. Originally, it was because horses were so startled by steam engines, people thought it was because of all the rods and gears and wheels moving, so they thought they'd put a passenger car over the steam engine to hide it. Turns out that the horses were really scared of the noise. So that didn't really last long. But there was a period when you saw a lot of these. This particular one is marked Bay Ridge. And I'm almost positive this is running down 7th Avenue in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. I used to work in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. And I thought, wow, that would be great. So that became my second project. These are the parts that I received from that Railway Recollections kit to build an HON 30 Porter. And the idea was, the kit was designed to fit over the mechanism of a lifelike 060 N-gauge switcher, this one. This becomes the mechanism for the steam dummy. I've removed the superstructure. And when you put the two together, you have, there's the N-gauge mechanism. And this is the Porter part, except there's no cab, because the cab is going to come from this. This was such a fun project, really. I had to cut it off right about here and then move this back wall up to here and move the front wall back, and then adjust the roof so that it fit the new size. And when I finished putting it all together and then sprayed it with primer, I had something that looked like this. And I thought, wow, that looks a lot like that picture of the Bay Ridge steam dummy. I decided I would paint it in something that looked kind of 1800s Victorian look to it. So it ended up being a bright red with Bay Ridge along the side. And you can see where the boiler pump comes through the front. Here's a side view, which I think is fun. This actually runs, but it's since the lifelike locomotive was DC, it only runs on DC, and I don't have any place to run it. So it sits in a little plastic box on my desk where I can enjoy it. There's a view from the other side. All right, we're almost done. The third model, I decided I wanted to try building a model of EBT number 6, which was a standard gauge switcher used to shunt cars around in the yards at Mount Union. This was a very old locomotive when they bought it. It was probably built around 1900. And I suspect that it was Baldwin just had it in stock, and EBT was looking for a switcher, and they just bought it off the floor, so to speak.
Oh.
Sorry? Thought heard somebody said something. The other switcher at Mount Union was number 3, which is built in the 20s and has a steel cab rather than a wood one, and it's a very different looking, much heavier looking locomotive. Here's a picture of it in front of the water tank at Mount Union. This one was probably used 2 weeks in the summer, most years, when number 3 was down for repairs and maintenance. They get number 6 out, move it around. But it's just such a quaint looking locomotive. So I decided I would modify an AHM Southern Pacific 060. It has some of the features. It's about the right length. It has the right kind of steam chest and valve gear. It has the swallowtail tender. Unfortunately, it's an oil burner. The domes don't look anything like domes on number 6. And they're not in the right position. Here's the bell is between the steam dome and the forward sand dome. And it's supposed to be, the bell comes after the chimney on the real one. So a lot of work to be done, starting with removing all of the stuff on the boiler. What I did was drill from the underside through the top of each of these plastic domes, and then use bigger and bigger drill bits until I could drill out the entire thing and replace them with brass domes from PSC, patching the holes with white putty. And I had to remove the compound air pumps from the modern switcher because the number 6 has a single one long air pump over here by the cab. So a lot of changes, moving the bell around. Here's what it looked like when it was not quite finished, because I don't have the bell on yet. But you can see where the air pump is now here. We put a steam generator here, and the domes are much more appropriate and in the right positions. One of the most interesting things about the standard gauge switchers at Mount Union are the couplers. Because they shunted both narrow gauge and standard gauge cars, they had both a standard gauge coupler and a narrow gauge coupler. There's actually a space on the other side of the standard gauge coupler for another narrow gauge coupler. But since these engines were never turned, there was no standard gauge Y at Mount Union. They always faced one direction. So I just had to put a coupler, one narrow gauge coupler on in the right side. And here's a picture of how that got done with the, this is actually a 714, an HON3 coupler, but it does couple with a KD number 5. So you can use it to couple up with standard gauge cars. This is an N gauge coupler, but it does couple with HON3 number KD 714s. So you can use it as a narrow gauge coupler. I also had to remodel the back head. These are mostly parts from PSC, the water glass, the firebox doors, valves, the throttle, etc. And here's what the thing looked like when it was done. It still doesn't quite look like number 6, but it's getting there. Here's a 3/4 view. You notice that the tires on this model are brass. That was my big disappointment. It doesn't run well. The brass wheels pick up dirt like crazy. I actually bought a kit to an electrolysis kit to replate the wheels with nickel silver, which I've never used because I've never quite figured out how I would do that. So this one is just like the real number 6. It mostly sits in the engine house, doesn't come out very often. So that ends that part of my presentation. The last part is simply, I'd like to take you on a ride on my railroad. This is filmed from a tiny little cube camera, not Panasonic, the cameras that used to make instant photos long ago, Polaroid. Little Polaroid cube camera sitting on a flat car pulled by number 14, and it'll take you around the entire layout. It's about an 8-minute trip. That'll conclude the presentation, and you'll be able to see a lot of the buildings and structures that we've talked about this evening. And it's just kind of fun to take a ride on a train. So here we go. So I just have to get it full size now. What did I do again? Oop. Why am I having problems? Oh, well.
Russ, this is in a browser showing YouTube as opposed to the.
Yes, this is a YouTube.
Yes. And I think YouTube might have a button to put it out to full screen, and that might produce a good result, and we'll see.
There we go. Thanks. Thank you very much.
Russ, videos are notoriously choppy on Zoom.
Oh, okay. Let me stop sharing for a minute.
It's well, if you stop sharing, it'll go away.
I need to. Phooey. Hold it.
Hold on a sec.
Hold it.
It's okay to play it. If you want, we can. If you want to send us the link to the YouTube, we can put that up on the.
Well, I was going to say I can optimize screen sharing for a video clip. Let me try.
Okay.
There's the engine house. Now, there are sections here that are not scenic yet, so be patient. The roundhouse is off on the left here. Car shop we're passing. One of my first scratch built structures. You can see over on the other side of the aisle, the outline. coal bunker, the south end of the yards. This is an unfinished section. There was another narrow gauge railroad that shared some trackage with the EBT. It was a logging line called the McKelvey Brothers logging company, and so I built a logging scene to run my show, which is not shown here. Backyards, company store, walking offices. We call it out. This area is under construction. There's going to be a engine house there and a strip mine and a deep mine on the left-hand side. The next project. Down below in the area just coming into view, that's the standard gauge line. The loop actually loops underneath the narrow gauge line and then reemerges. And right around here is the double crossover. I know. It's an upside down car. I didn't even know it was there until I made this video. that is it. I gotta. stop
Great
sharing.
job.
Great job.
Yeah, nice job.
Oh, thank you.
Very good.
Okay. I gotta get this thing turned off now.
Russ, that was excellent.
Thank you.
It's taken Russ about 9 months to put this together. So I know how tough it is to put together a clinic, and he did a fabulous job.
I'm trying to get that off the screen.
Thank you, Russ. That was good.
Yeah, me and David from Little
Well
Rhodey, we just put a clinic on for signals. And it took us a little better than a month to put it together.
Yeah. So Russ, at this point, either you can go to the bottom where it says record and you can stop the recording, or you can pass back the host to me and I'll do it one way or the other. Or
I'll let you take care of that.
what's that?
I'll let you take care of that.
Okay, can you transfer me back to being the host?
I can try. What do I do? Oh, I see up there, it says recording.
Yeah,